Well, good evening to all of you. I am Tracy Monique Fletcher, the proud president of the Houston Metropolitan Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I want to welcome each of you for joining us for this much needed discussion on reimagining public safety. I will take a moment of presidential privilege to thank our Social Action Committee Chair, Jasmine Turner, our Social Action Co-Chair, Nicole Blake, and our Social Action Senior Chair, Carolyn Williams, along with our second VP and Program Chair, Glenicia Green, for the work you have put in to make this panel discussion happen. Thank you to our panelists and our guests for your participation, and expertise on this pressing issue of reimagining public safety. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for the evening. Janae Branch is a native Houstonian who earned her bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from the University of Oklahoma. Upon graduation, Janae began working for an energy services company. During her tenure, she held numerous roles from mergers and acquisitions lead to talent development manager to global continuous improvement project manager. All of these roles had a common theme. They allowed her to work with the stakeholders of a process to understand the details, determine opportunities for improvement, and facilitate the execution of action plans. In addition to her daily responsibilities, Janae volunteered to create a global employee resource group, ERG, resource group, ERG, for Black employees and allies. Creating the ERG allowed her to develop the ERG strategy and governance. Through her work with the ERG, Janae discovered her passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and decided to pivot her career. She furthered her knowledge of DEI with certifications from the National Diversity Council and Cornell University. Janae worked as a DEI strategy consultant before joining ConocoPhillips as senior DEI advisor. I introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Janae Branch.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome, Tracy, and excited to be here with you all and with the panelists on this wonderful event entitled Reimagining, Public Safety. Before we hop into this robust discussion that we have planned for you all, I want to take some time to really highlight and introduce the panelists for this evening. So first, I'd like to start off with Njeh. Joy is a research analyst at the Kinder Institute with a Master's of Arts in Sociology and a Master's of Science in Criminal Justice. She is also currently a PhD candidate in sociology with her research focusing primarily on the fear of crime, trust in the police, and the role of individuals, neighborhood, and community factors in neighborhood safety. If you will, join me in welcoming Joy Njeh. Secondly, we have Sergeant Johnnie E. Davis Jr. In just a few short months in July of this year of 2024, Sergeant Dennis will celebrate 15 years of service with Metro Police. He has held the sergeant title for 5 years and is also assigned as the administrative sergeant to the Support Operations Assistant Chief. He earned an associate's degree in applied arts and science and criminal justice from Houston Community College, a bachelor's of applied arts and science and criminal justice from University of Houston downtown, and is currently a grad student at Lamar University for a master's of science in criminal justice set to graduate this May. So early congratulations, Sergeant Dennis. Sergeant Dennis has the responsibility of serving as a basic instructor for law enforcement courses and active shooter instruction. He has 2 daughters, Jaden, who is 14 and a freshman, and Johnnie, who is 17 and a senior. Congratulations on all the upcoming accomplishments and celebrations that you have. And then finally, our third panelist is Tiffany D. Thomas. As Houston City Council member for District F, Tiffany D. Thomas has helped revitalize neighborhoods, partner with corporations and nonprofits to solve community issues, and inspired future generations of civic leaders to get involved. Thomas is a product of the local school system and a lifelong public servant representing Houston's most diverse part of town. As chair of the Housing and Community Affairs Committee, Councilmember Thomas oversees priorities related to housing, veteran affairs, and homelessness. She is vocal about the importance of public safety, education, preserving affordable housing options for all families, and quality of life investments, such as the A-Leaf Neighborhood Center. Thomas is a graduate of Leadership Houston 31, Women's Campaign School at Yale, American Leadership Forum 44, and the renowned Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. She is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the National Chair of Social Action for the Links, and a National League of Cities Community and Economic Development Federal Advocacy Community member. If you will, please join me in welcoming our panelists. And I see you all have your cameras on, so perfect. Before we jump into the first question, I do want to let the audience know if you have questions that come up, please put those in the chat. We have individuals who will be monitoring the chat and also answering the questions via chat. So like I said, don't hold them as they come up. Please drop those in the chat and they will get answered and addressed accordingly. So I want to kick off. There's a lot of language and a lot of definitions out there, right, when we think about public safety and things like that. So Tiffany, I want to throw this first question to you. When we hear public safety, a lot of times people think dark alleys or violent crimes, but what are some ways everyday citizens can think about the public safety differently?
Sure. Thank you. Before I respond, I just want to thank the Child Chapter President and our social action chairs for the invitation and the committee for this, what I will know to be a very robust conversation. So you're absolutely right. I think with our national organization making a priority of reimagining public safety, it really all forced us to think differently about it. Post George Floyd, many of us can point to Mike Brown in St. Louis, other iterations. For me, in the seat that I sit in, oftentimes we center policing around public safety. And we're often thinking about the violent crimes that you're talking about. I would like to offer to community and those that are watching, members, friends, and the general public, that we need to redefine safety as we invest in the safety of our neighborhoods, right? So simple questions such as, do you feel safe allowing your children to walk from your home to the public park? Do you feel safe getting off the Metro bus if you worked in the medical center and riding that from the TMC and the Wheeler and getting on a Metro bus from 2 to 11 and getting off that bus and then walking to the parking lot? Do you feel safe? Do you have enough street lighting? Do you have enough investment in terms of public infrastructure, in terms of safety? And Joy can probably speak to this, but some of her colleagues at the Rice Baker Institute released a study that the media picked up recently around the Houston's most dangerous hotspots for children at intersections, right? So we don't have enough public infrastructure investments that's creating these hotspots that children can't even simply cross the street to get to a school, to get to a park to play. And then that's exacerbated when we're looking at our senior population, those with limited mobility, our disabled community. So to me, that's the definition that we need to really start pushing and rethinking how we invest our funds in terms of safety.
No, thank you for that. I like the fact that you mentioned, let's really make it real for everyday life. What are your everyday activities, and do you feel safe doing those everyday activities? Joy, I do want to pull you in a bit on this too, and thinking about what are some current crime trends that we're seeing in our communities?
So I just want to start by saying thank you for inviting Kinder into this very timely conversation. One thing Kinder Service has been seeing is increasing concern about safety in the Houston area. So one question we always ask in our surveys for over the past 42 years has been, what do Houston residents think is the greatest issue in the Houston area? And repeatedly, we've seen crime and safety come up as one of these first issues. More recently, in our 2023 survey, we saw crime emerge as a top issue. 28% of Houston residents said crime was a top issue in the Houston area. And even though crime has been declining in the Houston area, in the US overall, in the past recent years, we still see that over 85% of Houston residents still feel that addressing crime should be the mayor's top priority. So speaking of specific crime trends in Houston, we've seen aggravated assault. Compared to 2019, we are seeing that there's been an increase in aggravated assault, simple assault, dropped from 2019 to 2023. But the most common crimes we are seeing in the Houston areas are things like motor vehicle theft and theft from cars. So in 2019, we saw that a lot of car break-ins were happening in Houston. But now, instead of car break-ins going up, we are seeing that more cars are being stolen. So those are some of the most common crimes we are seeing in the Houston area.
Okay, so I heard you mention aggravated assault, simple assault, and then also motor vehicle theft. So kind of upping the ante, if you will, when it comes to the motor vehicles. Just wondering, do we see within those data points any notable data trends or demographic patterns from a mental health perspective? Is there a mental health component there as well?
Based on these crimes, we haven't noticed any mental health trends. We haven't actually actively looked into mental health and these crimes we are seeing in Houston. And that is because the research has shown that mental health is not as related to criminal offenses as much as we hear about it in the news, in the media. Actually, mental health individuals or people who have mental illness are more likely to be victims of crimes than perpetrators. And even when we see them coming in contact with the criminal justice system, it's more frequently for minor offenses like public disturbance, jaywalking, vandalism. And these are usually issues that are more due to their situation, the illness they are going through, and not because they are being violent.
And if I may add just a point, just to color in that data, over the last year and a half or so, when we look at those aggravated assault crimes, that simple assault, when you tease the data out, a lot of that's happening in home. A lot of that's domestic related. And so sometimes we, it's not the 90s where we are afraid of drive-by shootings. Not like that does not happen, but for the large percentage, we're talking about family relationship, calls for service, going to someone's residence because there's an altercation between spouses, domestic partners, parents and children. So I think like the elevated piece around that is our continued work in making sure there's a safety net around, and our investment in safety, that once we extract victims of domestic violence, we extract families of domestic violence, where do they go? Right? We don't have the housing infrastructure to respond. We don't have the social services network in the city. They need additional funding, which then ultimately drives up the resource and the demand for public safety officials, where they should be focusing on violent crimes. They should be focusing on priority calls. They are limited to domestic issues, right? And so I think that was one of the data points that once we tease that out when we receive our monthly reports, that was always interesting to me, is that this is happening at home. And the way that the Houston Police Department specifically codes it is almost as kidnapping, right? So it'll show up as kidnapping on the report, but it's domestic violence. It's a domestic violence altercation. So I think that's an interesting point for us to also note.
Thank you for that color commentary. As somebody who likes data, I'd like to understand what's the root cause, right? So what is the data actually telling us, so that we can understand what corrective actions do we need to put in place. And I do want to let you all know, this is a conversation. So Tiffany, just like you just did, if there are comments that you all want to make on a specific question, feel free to jump in and chime in, so that if you have something to add to the conversation, we can have that here for the folks that are on the call. But I think we're kind of pivoting to an interesting point in how do we leverage the public safety officials to help in these different areas. So when we think about aggravated assault in the home, when we think about home battery, when we think about individuals who have mental health issues and might be having a mental health crisis. So Sergeant Dennis, I want to pull you in and just, can you talk us through what type of training are officers getting when they're having to deal with a person that might have mental health issues, or they're called to a home where there's aggravated assault? how are they trained to help support the victim and maybe even understanding who the victim is in that situation?
Okay. Again, good evening, and thank you for this invitation, this invite here on behalf of Metro Police Department. So, as it relates to mental health, T-Code, Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, who we get our licenses from to be peace officers and then police officers, they have incorporated some new change within continuing to keep your license. So with that, everything goes back to training. So they added a mandatory assignment for us to complete, which calls for 40 hours of mental health training. So officers go off site, go to, whatever departments may put the classes on, and 40 hours, those 5 days for that week, 8 hours a day, you are going through different scenarios. And sometimes we were going outside and actually having role plays where we have to react and we have to go through what we would, basically handle in that situation. We also have 8 hours of mandatory de-escalation training. And this is for every officer. And now it's coming through within the academy. So those officers who have been on the streets already, they have to go and take the classes versus those who are actually coming through the academies at Houston Police, Harris County, so on and so forth. They have to take their class and take those, those different scenarios and role plays. And it's almost a pass or fail. In some instances, you have to go back and, really get good at it because this is what we're dealing with out here day to day, especially within Metro. Within transit, we deal with it all. And some people may not know, but to piggyback on what Thomas was saying about the calls at home, so on and so forth, Metro officers, we can be riding along the train system or along the bus line and get flagged down by people at their homes, at their complexes, whatever the case may be, and we still are responsible for responding as well because we are police officers first, and that happens. So with that, we make sure our officers are trained, and let's take it a step further. We also, most agencies are starting to add clinicians who deal with mental health day to day. And so with that, I know HPD, they have an officer and a clinician, they ride together. I know we at Metro, we have an officer that we actually sent to assist HPD that rides with a clinician. We also have clinicians just every day that ride and check the facilities that we have. They check the bus shelters, they check the platforms for whether they, they may see themselves because they can diagnose that a little bit sooner rather than what we can, and even some people out, in the public. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to dealing with that, we're not everywhere at the same time. We definitely need the public to call us to say, hey, I believe someone is dealing with this. And that's pretty much how we try to deal with it right now. But at the end of the day, on-the-job training is the best training in order to deal with that.
No, that's rich. It's a couple of things that I want to follow up on. So the first one is you mentioned it on the Metro Rail, and I know that in the media and things like that, we've heard a lot about different incidents or recent incidents that have happened on the Metro Rail. I'm wondering if you can shed any light on what safety protocols or procedures have been put in place to help both passengers feel safe and comfortable to ride the Metro Rail, but then also the staff as well that utilize it. I know myself, I used it to go to the rodeo, and I was on there with staff members who were trying to get to work as well. So wondering if you have any thoughts that you can share on that.
Well, so just like any incident, it derives from something or somewhere. In some instances, some things walking and onto a platform and into a train. Sometimes those incidents are isolated. Again, we assist outside agencies because sometimes things may start at home and then trickle down to the system because a lot of people utilize the Metro system. But what we have civilian fire inspectors who are not only checking fares on the system, they're also extra eyes and ears for the system to relay things back to us at the department, so that we're able to immediately, come to those areas and, take care of those situations as they may be, transpiring at the time. We also have a system where you can actually text. A lot of people are texters. Nobody these days kind of want to take the phone call to dial 911. So we actually have a system. It's an app where you can actually text our dispatchers if you have an issue, right? We also have a system online where you can go in and type in a public comment, so that if we're not aware, you can make us aware for future references, okay? And basically someone will respond to that message. You may say, hey, someone appears to have mental issues at a bus shelter that we may not have seen at the time, but then if you see it and it's near your area, your home, and you want to help, whatever the case may be, you can actually help us with that by putting that out there and helping us get that immediate response. And that goes with pretty much everything that we have, because again, we have people riding the system, we have officers riding the trains, following the trains, riding the buses, and following the buses. We also have officers that work plain clothes, and people may never know that they are MPD officers, but they're doing surveillance for something that we may have received via the complaint line, or again, what we have is called public comments, and we also have one called MPD Connect. And so I'm actually responsible directly as an admin sergeant to see those. So it takes everybody to, come together and say, okay, how can we slow down what we have going on? Again, things are going to rapidly change. We have to constantly make changes on our end as far as a police department to try to figure out different deployment strategies, which we did recently at the end of the year.
Thank you.
May I just add one quick thing with that, and to just lay out and color in some more lines. So I'm going to take off my council hat and I'm going to put on my Delta hat. So we have the chief of police for Metro is a soror. She's a member of our sorority. And earlier in January, you may have recalled that there was an announcement to merge Metro and the Houston Police Department. So in terms of numbers, Sergeant Dennis is absolutely correct. Metro is moving hundreds of thousands of people a day. For when we had the celebration for the Astros, Metro moved 1.3 million folks throughout the city. Imagine if there was not a public safety department to manage that. Imagine if we did not have the coverage at our Wheeler station, our parking rides. Imagine if we didn't have, because there are assaults at times. There are folks that are unwell and they may be having a mental experience, and we don't have trained personnel. Imagine covering a territory of 2.3 million residents and not having a public safety division dedicated to protecting those to choose public transit, especially when, as our city grows, we're encouraging more people to use public transit. It's necessary, right? So I'm going to take that off. So I think it's really important for members of the chapter and the general public that's watching to keep your eyes on those types of announcements, and then how that exposes and leaves vulnerable other pieces of infrastructure that we need in our city. When we're talking about public safety and reimagining, it's so important when you think of that nurse coming from the medical center, or you think of that graduate student coming from Rice, or you think of, that mom working that second job on that public transit, what we open them up to if we don't have public safety officials like Sergeant Dennis maintaining that. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to pose this question to all three panelists, because I imagine you might see it in different parts of the work, but and Sergeant Dennis, you've talked about and you touched on technology, being able to text the different systems and things that we have in place where citizens can notify, and you're getting active real-time information. I'm just wondering, from your three different vantage points, how are you all seeing technology impact public safety? Of course, AI is all the rage right now, facial recognition. and things like that. So when we look at things like surveillance cameras and data analytics, how are you all seeing technology either help or just come into play when we think about public safety and reimagining public safety?
Great question. Great question. So I just want to start off by saying CCTV. Okay. Without those, not just Metro, right? Even at our homes, right? We protect our homes with cameras, right? Without the camera system that we have on the platforms, that we have inside the trains, on the outside of the trains, same goes for buses, same goes at the transit centers on the parking ride. It's been so great for us as an agency that any time we have these assaults or robberies or any type of what we call part one crimes that occur, we are able to catch those suspects very, very quickly. So I can honestly say that because of that, and again, I'll go back to Metro, the agency, with our civilian fast inspectors, helping us, because we typically put out with any agency, a lot of people don't see this, but what we call BOLO, be on the lookout, right? And if someone was assaulted, we have officers, we have civilian fire inspectors who are dedicated to catching the suspects that we may have on our systems, even if these are frequent riders or just one time visiting the city to just catch the train and may have had an altercation with someone. But our camera systems are so amazing, and without those, our rate of closing our cases, we would not be where we are. We have a high rate of closing our cases. We don't typically leave anything open for too long. We definitely follow up on everything, and we follow up with the complainants in most cases, just to let them know, hey, we're still working, or we close it out. And we take that really, really serious within Metro. We have access at our dispatch to where we can utilize the CCTV and chime right into the system inside the train, so we can see real time. We also have the systems that are outside on the platforms. It's so great that we help other agencies, right? Our neighboring agencies, from the school district to Houston, of course, Harris County. They have people who may commit crimes at apartment complexes or homes and run and jump on buses, right? And then now we have an issue whenever we have to come in contact with them, because now they're on our system again. So we try to make sure we work well with our neighboring agencies. We sometimes exchange information. We also have officers that work directly with the other agencies at what we would call a fusion center, right? Everybody's sharing information, sharing technology, so that we're all on the same page. We're all on the same page. There is no, it's just this agency, it's just that agency, as long as we can all work together. Because to take this step further, which people might not think about, there are instances where officers have issues with officers, maybe both agencies working undercover and no one's talking to each other, right? Called blue on blue. So we have to utilize the technology. That's as simple as picking up the phone and calling, right? We can go back to cell phones. So again, without the public stepping in and helping us with everything, as well as us continuing to update our technology. We have systems on our parking rides that read license plates as soon as you enter and exit. So the cars are, say, stolen, or someone comes into our parking ride who just committed this crime somewhere else after stealing the vehicle, and it comes inside, we are getting these notices as soon as possible. So again, technology has been great. Right now, we're just continuing to update our systems.
Nice. Joy, when you think about, I know you all are collecting massive amounts of data, especially with the surveys. How are you seeing data analytics start to play a role? Or I'm sorry, technology start to play a role in data analytics?
That's a very good question. Technology has definitely made keeping track of records and crime incidences and locations very much easy. And one thing that is emerging with crime data, with studying crime and helping communities, is knowing the characteristics of these communities where you are seeing the crime, because the neighborhood context is very important. for dealing with the crime. So while police are being effective, we also want to inform policy that can help actually address the root of the problem. So having this advanced technology, having access to spatial analysis tools like crime mapping, and other things that help us organize data, it helps us inform policy that can actually address the issues we are seeing in these communities. And now, with regards to public safety, everybody can now keep track of crimes going on in Houston or in other cities. We have websites where you can go on there. If you want to move into a new neighborhood, you can put in the zip code, or you put in whatever information you need about that neighborhood, and it will inform you about trends in the neighborhood with regards to crime, with regards to safety, the presence of street lights, the presence of transportation. So all of those resources you need to be informed about staying safe in your daily decisions. We now have them available to the public due to these advances in technology.
I really like the point that you mentioned of using the data to be even more strategic in how we disperse our resources when it comes to public safety. And I imagine the technology is helping you get to those conclusions quicker and more efficiently. So I'm happy that we're trying to leverage that in that way. How are you seeing it, Tiffany, from your vantage point?
I mean, she's absolutely right. There's several significant ordinances that we passed last year to address the quality of life in neighborhoods that directly ties to safety. We have, because Houston, we have no zoning, your neighborhood could sit right next to an after hours. And that peak COVID in 2021, we all remember when every bar turned into a restaurant and every neighborhood bar was trying to stay open, right? And then we supported small businesses, and we wanted people to make their money, but also what resulted in that, we had, an increase of incidents in the parking lot. We've had, at least in my district specifically, because of a club that was right there for Clark Crest in Richmond. They were shooting in the parking lot. A bullet went through a child's window, missed the child. Child chose to no longer sleep in the bedroom because of the trauma. We've had residents that have had to pay for their windshield because it's been blown out by bullets, just because they're shooting in the middle of the night. So based on that data, we've become more sophisticated and really have forced our public agencies to become more public facing in reporting this information. So we passed an after hours ordinance, so we can put a handle on that. We've had some homicides. And so, all it takes is for one shooting to happen. All it takes is for, the abuse of property, violation of property to happen in those clubs. We've seen increase of drug trafficking, sometimes prostitution. So with that ordinance on the books, that has given HPD some more teeth to actually respond to that. So listen, it's 2024, and we are closer to a lot of information because of technology and social media. So it's only appropriate that our government institutions reflect back public facing information. So, to Joy's point, you should be able to look in your neighborhood and see kind of where you're landing, right? How safe is your neighborhood in comparison to others? And then that should just prompt other questions as to why, right? For me, that question often means, how can we invest in streetlights? How do we invest in streets and sidewalks? How do we, the simple things that you can experience in near the memorial communities, or in the villages, or in River Oaks, right? And some parts on the north side, or in Pearland, in our suburbs. There's a reason why people are choosing to move to a suburb and to leave the city proper, right? Because they don't have all those amenities. Safety, as we get ready for the summertime, we're going to approach hurricane season. That's a public safety issue, right? How prepared are we when we look at certain zip codes that have a higher probability of flooding? Most of those zip codes look like us. For Cashmere Gardens, I believe by itself, the city of Houston has experienced 7 federally declared disasters. Cashmere by itself has close to $32 million in verified FEMA loss, with 7 federally declared disasters. So just imagine about the amount of loss, and then how much do you need to invest in that neighborhood before it starts, it reaches its tipping point, that it starts generating on its own, and that people move back to the community and build their homes and they have the right infrastructure. So they don't flood, right? These are the same service areas that our chapter goes into to provide services. And so I think that, we have an opportunity to move from providing services to elevating our social action, to advocating on their behalf. In these zip codes, knowing they don't have sidewalks, knowing they don't have street lighting, knowing that the crosswalks at those elementary schools, you can't see them, and those kids may get hit by a car. Like, that's where we take our advocacy to the next level. I know that was not the question, but I'm going to just give you that.
No, and you helped me segue to my next one, which is kind of in that same vein, because we're talking about technology and there's so much out there and so many resources for citizens and residents and things like that. Where can a person go to request certain infrastructure like street lights or speed bumps, or hey, the school zone light is out? Where do they put that information? Is it 311?
311. 311 is your friend. That is the data collection portal for the city of Houston. And the customer service reps on that line, they're not going to provide, they're receiving your information. But that's where we start, right? A lot of times people drive past the street and the sidewalk of the blighted area and they say, someone should do something about that. Why aren't they doing anything about that, right? But no one ever calls it in. And so that happens a lot. So when you call 311, that starts the investigation and it's routed to the appropriate department. One of our, chapter members, Veronica Davis, in her former capacity, I went to school. I went to a high school in Alief ISD, and the assistant principal pulled me to the side. She says, hey, these crosswalks, I'm concerned about these kids. Like, you can't see them. They're faded. Is that your responsibility or is it the school? I said, well, let me figure that out. Mentioned it during council. Immediately her team prioritized those intersections, and we were able to restripe a little bit more than 10 that needed immediate attention. And so those resources are available. It doesn't always happen as quick as like a council member's request, but I'll tell you, it is in the queue. And as we approach budget season for the city of Houston, we look to 311 and those calls to help us with data on how we invest in certain areas. So if you're not calling it in, you're not driving up the dashboard, it doesn't flag to us that this is a need. Similar to census, right? We can always say, why don't we have a hospital here? Why don't we have a bank here? Well, if the census information is low there, the demand, right, doesn't meet the moment, the need. And so similarly, 311 for sidewalks, speed bumps in your neighborhood. Y'all are in, young neighborhoods or have a neighborhood with a lot of kids and you want speed cushions, 311 that, and your council member can fund that. I fund speed cushions left, right, up, and down. So that's not something that we arbitrarily can do on our own. We must have public participation. It must be initiated by community members. And I will tell you, I encourage civic clubs. Many of them do this on behalf of an entire subdivision. So that's an opportunity for the committee, an opportunity for the chapter, and an opportunity for civic clubs and individuals alike.
Perfect. I live in the Fifth Ward community, and I've used 311. I will say I also enjoy being able to go back in and see the status of my case, and that's really helpful, so that it doesn't feel like it fell on deaf ears. So I'm glad to hear that you all are using that actively to understand how to distribute funds and resources and support.
Yeah, I had over 16,000 311 calls in my district alone in 2023. So, and I'm not even, I think District C is maybe 30,000, 25,000, right? And I'm gonna just say that District C is like Montrose, right? And they get what they get, right? So you need to make sure that you're putting it in, because see, they know how to use the system. They know how to advocate for themselves. They're pausing and saying, how do we get organized? So you're right. We have upgraded that technology to where you can see when a work order has been placed, when it's the case has been routed up, when it's under review, and it ultimately informs our financial decisions.
Thank you for that. So this one, I'm going to provide a little bit of back information. So we recently had the Delta Days at the nation's capital, and we heard a term called Community Violence Intervention, or CVI programs. And according to Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, CVI programs focus on individuals most at risk of being a victim of or committing an act of gun violence. And so we think about some of our high crime neighborhoods. We have McGregor, Greenspoint, Leland and Scott Street, Titwell area. So now we're getting kind of near that Cashman Gardens area and even Sunnyside. And Tiffany, I'll throw this question to you and welcome insight from the other panelists. Does the city of Houston have any CVI programs that you can speak on that address those types of situations and crimes?
So we call it something differently. We call it the Credible Messenger program on a level. And then the health department has a program for reentry. But the Credible Messenger program was introduced as a budget amendment from Council Member Tarsha Jackson on the North Side, your council member, really where community members were empowered, those who were credible, those who had street currency, to go in and do community level intervention so we could keep them out of Sergeant Dennis's face, right? Like that was the goal, is that so we can keep him focused on some serious calls, and we can reroute them to programming and services, a summer jobs program. We've had close to 15,000 young people every summer sign up for summer jobs. That number continues to grow. The former mayor's goal was, I think the Houston gang division had stated at one point there were around 15 or 20,000 gang members in the city of Houston. And his commitment was to make sure that every single one of them had a job. So that's where we got that 15,000 from. And that number has continued to grow. So the city of Houston doesn't have a jail system. We don't have that. We got out of that business a long time ago. So our interventions are more so with having a clinician and the social worker within the institution of our public safety agency, but then also with our health department. We received some funding from the federal government, My Brother's Keeper, also through the Complete Communities footprint of looking at their action plans and how we invest based on the people's priorities, right? So when we look at, again, it goes back to reimagining and the definition around it. If they don't have nothing to do after school, they're going to steal your catalytic converter, right?
Yeah.
So, right, I mean, like right? So if we're cutting libraries at Houston Independent School District, if we are no longer hiring librarians at Spring Branch, if we're no longer investing in after school programming, what do we think is going to happen, right? So then what the city has done is come in with partnerships on after school programming, activations at the Houston Public Library, partnering with nonprofits and corporations to supplement that, because there is a demand on the city as an institution to do that. But in a formal sense, most of those funds come from federal dollars, like My Brother's Keeper and to the like.
I do want to call out, I really enjoy having the three of you all on the panel, because I can see how you all work and sync together, even if you're not at a table together all the time. So the data that we get from the Kinder Institute and organizations like that informs some of the decisions that we're making at the city council, in addition to other data. And then those ordinances and those programs that you're putting in place allows the resources to be distributed appropriately for the police departments that we have around the city, and are freeing them up, to your point, to keep some people out of their faces, so that they can go on to more higher priority things that we need them to work on. So I'm glad that you all are here this evening and shedding some light on kind of how those links tie together. So Sergeant Dennis, I do want to talk through, how can everyday citizens successfully engage with law enforcement? We talked about how the city is engaging in different ordinances, and we know about the different texting platforms, but are there other ways that citizens can engage with law enforcement or elected officials to really make impactful change in their communities?
That's a really, really good question. Before I answer that question, I want to speak on how I got into law enforcement, right? Honestly, I was in Third Ward, Houston, on Almere at the Chase Bank right there at like Sophomore, right?
Yeah.
I saw a Precinct 7 constable vehicle in the drive-thru. I got out of my car and I walked up to this officer who's in his vehicle and asked him, how can I become a police officer, right? I didn't walk up to an HPD officer. I just walked up to an officer, right? And he jumped out, talked with me for about an hour, and gave me what I needed to become who I am today. So I'm going to say first, just talk to us. Just talk to us, right? Don't only talk to us because you need or you have an issue, right? Let's just have a little dialogue, right? We are individuals as well, right? Because after a certain point in time, we also take off the uniforms, right? And we look just like everybody else, right? While still in our mind thinking that we're never off duty, right? We may get called up to go and help someone even off duty, right? So again, for us and for me, being from the Southeast Houston side of town, I'm actually from the Cullen and Scott area of South Acres. Um, so I understand. And again, growing up where I was, you didn't approach. You know, you stayed away, you stayed far away, all right? But after a while, it had to change. For me, it had to change. So I wasn't introduced to the things that you would run into nowadays to meet officers. For example, coffee with the cop, right? We have these things that we have maybe once every quarter, maybe once a month, where we go out to our the Metro Administration Building in downtown at 1900 Main, and people that come in, we have donuts, we have coffee, we have water, we have orange juice, and we greet the public, right? And it's not in a hostile environment. It's not us really working and trying to be authoritative, right? We're letting our hair down and we're kind of relaxed as well, right? We have that. We also have National Night Out, which is in October every year, during, law enforcement week. So people come out, we go to certain areas. At Metro, we again partner with everybody. Some officers may go to a civics club, a community center, a park in the neighborhood. We partner with HPD, Harris County, all the precincts, the school districts. We go out and we try to greet the people that we service. And that's what it all comes down to, greeting the people that we service. At one point in time, I used to do apartment security back in the days, right? And I used to have my manager set up a night for me to do a town hall meeting to greet people. It's all about that, right, in law enforcement, right? Because we serve the public. How can we be better at our job? How can you feel safer by just approaching us? Every officer is not just out to, hand on their gun whenever someone is approaching, right? So again, we are still trying to think about additional ways to do this. Boys and Girls Club having those meetings with individuals. And again, just trying to think of different ways to have those outings where people can come and talk to us. We have some days, like once a week, we have high visibility days at Metro, right? Everybody wears our high visibility shirts, so no one can say we're not seeing Metro PD on the system, right? You see these shirts as not only our our civilian fair spectators who wear the high visibility, like lime green neon shirts. We also wear those, or we wear a light blue shirt where people can see us, who can come up to us, approach us. And again, we are not only officers, sometimes we are counselors, right? We're nurses out there, we're doctors out there in some instances, depending on what's going on. And again, we just want to figure out ways to get back to what COP stands for, right? Community-oriented policing. We want to get back to that. And again, it takes us having these conversations and trying to change the future.
I really appreciate you saying that. At the end of the day, under the uniform is a human. And so how do you connect on a human level and just get to know what one another, which really segues us into kind of this next and last phase of the discussion. We've talked about a lot. We've thrown out a lot of great resources and information. And so I'm sure folks on the call are like, okay, but what are like the critical one or two things that I can do that I like to say, what's in my circle of control and influence, and what can I do to make my world or my community better? So I'm going to go or come to each of you, and if you could share 1 to 2 action items that folks can walk away with during this call this evening, that they can go out this later after the call or tomorrow, and they can actively do. If you could share those 1 to 2 items with us. So Joy, I'll start with you, and then follow up with Tiffany and Sergeant Dennis.
One action item I'd like us to leave with is the importance of being informed about what is going on in your communities. Be informed about what resources are available to you. Be informed about what policies are being made with regards to your communities, with regards to your concerns. And as an organization, one thing you can do is get more involved in community collaborations that address public safety more holistically. So not just supporting policies that will encourage tough on crime approaches, but also policies that will help build your various communities where you are, because just police action, just trying to fight the crime itself does not solve the issues we are facing about safety in the communities. So we need more research, we need more cooperation, we need more communities and the police working together in order to improve public safety. So one thing I would say is stay informed and get involved.
Thank you. Tiffany?
Sure. I think from an organization level, Delta is a part of the Black Pool of Genius, and we have very highly intelligent women that are part of our organization. And I think that should translate to making sure that members of the Social Action Committee and or other committees are assigned to local, attending public safety committee for the city, attending a commission for the county, attending going to Metro's board meeting to listen to what they're saying in terms of, budget, when they're talking about when we are in the process of our city budget, as I mentioned earlier, going to those budget hearings, being assigned to public works and planning. So you can see where they're planning on investing the sidewalks, the infrastructure, the sideway crossing. So you can have those questions ready on behalf of the priorities of the organization. It's so important that we are documented and on record, and we're no longer having insulated conversations between us, but that we are on record letting them know that there's an external group that's paying attention and we're calling for more in these neighborhoods. That's one as an organization. I think individually, we all have a responsibility. Public safety is all of our responsibility. If you literally see something, say something, call 311, call 911, realize that everything's not an emergency though. With calling 911, we do have non-emergency lines, and we have to prioritize, unfortunately, bad actors that choose to participate in violent crime against our neighbors. And so if the music is too loud with your neighbor, please just, kindly knock on their door. 911, they're not going to come immediately if the music is too loud, but definitely play your part. Sign up with your civic club, get active with your HOA. Those are, those granular organizations, you'll be surprised how much information they have in terms of what's happening. Get in relationship with your council office, your district member, your 5 at-large members, sign up for their newsletters. When surveys go out, participate. If you're not on record, I don't have anything to go to City Hall and say. I need to be able to take your opinion, take your feedback, and advocate on your behalf. So from an organization and individual level, there's definitely much more work for us to do.
Thank you. And Sergeant Dennis?
Well, for me, within law enforcement, we tend to tell ourselves the experience and exposure. I'm a person who came from riding the metro system, right, with my grandparents back in the days. I experienced a lot of things. I was exposed to them at an early age. With that, it keeps me mentally informed, right? And I can also see these things So for me, it's more so about continuing to add to what I know. That goes back to, let's say, the one-on-ones with law enforcement officers. What do you tell your kids, right? I've said on a panel, I forget the name of the panel, but it was mothers of black boys, right? Where I'm sitting here and I'm trying to inform them on what to tell our kids, right? When you have these one-on-ones and you're stopped by law enforcement with a friend, with a relative, with mom, with dad, doesn't matter, right? What are you supposed to do? And that's a whole nother topic right there. But again, as parents, as friends, we have to inform each other as well. Those do's and don'ts, the do's and don'ts are big for me. The laws change, city ordinances change, update yourself, right? We can't say, oh, well, I didn't know, but it was flashing on, Channel 11 when it first came out. Excuse me. Some of these things are out there for us to, excuse me, to learn and know, and it's up to us to educate ourselves. Again, experience and exposure. Don't say, oh, you stopped me because I'm black. Like that goes nowhere these days, right? Let's grow up a little bit. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. But I think what I've heard across all three panelists is knowledge, making sure that you're informed on what's going on in your community, and then taking that knowledge and getting involved in your community, be it civic club, HOA, however you deem fit, even if it's through 311, and making sure that you have the infrastructure that's needed and the data is in the system. So with that, I want to thank you all for allowing me to engage with you all in the conversation. I definitely learned a lot. I hope the folks on the call learned a lot. And with that, I will hand it over to Jasmine Turner.
Thank you so much, Janae, and to our panelists. This was a fantastic discussion, and I know we really just touched the surface this evening. I did take away a few things. Staying informed was number one. I saw a lot of questions in the chat, and people had questions about lighting around crossing guards at schools. And there were also some people in the chat that said 311 is my best friend, right? So we know that works. I think the big takeaway today is 311, 311, 311. Don't be afraid to voice your opinion. It's time for us to get off the sidelines and to stop complaining about things that we see in our communities and in our neighborhoods. Even if you might be driving through an area that you may not live in that's in Houston and you see that there's an issue, you can still call, right? You still are a citizen of this area. We all go to our certain areas across the city and we see things and we're like, that light should be on. I actually have an action item myself to make sure that there's a couple of lights on my street because they're out and they've been out for I don't even know how long, right? And so there's always an opportunity for us to stay engaged and to stay informed. When you see things on the news and you see pedestrians being hit by cars or you see shootings in certain areas, don't just look and say, oh, that's so sad. Why? Maybe ask yourself why. Why is this happening? Is there some research I can be done? Everybody doesn't necessarily need to be the biggest advocate or activist in the world. But if you just question or you reach out to a friend or a colleague, somebody that is abreast of what's going on, they can maybe provide some information and shed some light to you. So don't be afraid. There are no stupid questions. We're all in this together. I also like the idea of people being a part of civic clubs and your HOA, because that is where you drive down certain neighborhoods and you're like, well, how do they have these nice Christmas tree lights all year round? Well, that's because there's a group of people that make that happen, right? And that may not necessarily be tied to public safety, but that speaks to how the community can come together, right? And I just wanted to leave on this. There was something about showing up and being a part of the process that I believe Tiffany Thomas mentioned. And several of the members of the Houston Metropolitan Alumni Chapter were in Washington, D.C. with people from all over the country this past week. And we were on the Hill talking to our congressional leaders, telling them about Delta's priorities. And that's fair and that's great, right? But what really makes sense is for us to look at what's going on in our backyard. We know that our members of Congress are going to fight for us, but we need to be able to reach out to our city council members. We need to be able to talk to those that we can touch. We have a city council member on the call right now that is willing and ready to do anything for us, and she can reach out to other city council members. We have members who are staff of the city of Houston. Reach out to those networks and those people so that we can make sure that the city of Houston is safe for everyone. And like I said, reimagining public safety is not always about the crime statistics. It's really about making sure that everybody feels comfortable walking outside their door and just being able to cross the street. And with that, I am going to wrap up. I do have one more thing. I do want to remind everyone that the elections for the runoff elections for the primary are upon us. So I'll give you the dates really, really quick before we jump off, and then I'll turn it over to share the QR code for feedback. So the election day is May 28th. The last day to apply to vote by mail is May 17th. Early voting is May 20th through May 24th. And the last day to register for the runoff election is April 29th. So election day is May 28th. The last day to register is April 29th. All right, and I believe we're sharing QR code for event feedback survey. If you liked what you heard, if you want to hear more, please let us know. We look forward to hearing from you all. Your feedback is very important to us. The Social Action Committee works very, very hard to put on these events, and we have a lot of work to do. So please make time to fill out the survey. And we will be sending this link out to all of the registered attendees as well. And with that, I will close this out. You all have a good evening.